Hi everyone, welcome to your lesson on the social structure of ancient Egypt under my Ancient Egypt website. Make sure you go ahead and access this site by clicking on this link in the description below as well. So to start off with, writing down these in your books as your heading, this is your success criteria for this lesson. You're to know is the social structure in ancient Egyptian society, and you're to be able to describe the roles of each level. So let's go ahead. So you've got two lessons for the social structure. You've got lesson 1, an introduction to the social structure, and then you've got lesson 2, the role of the pharaoh. So why the pharaoh is so important. So first off, guys, your first job is to copy the social pyramid that I have here in your books. So you can see there were several levels of people in society, and this is how they were divided up. It's also worth noting that the size of the segment that is represented in the pyramid is the entire population of that people. So for instance, Pharaoh is at the top not only because he's very powerful, but because also there was only one pharaoh at a time, compared to slaves who were on the bottom because they were treated, worse than everyone. They were slaves, but there was also more slaves in ancient Egypt than anyone. So that's why they're on the bottom as well. They occupy the biggest segment, and that's why the social structure for ancient Egypt looks a lot like a pyramid, not just because ancient Egyptians were famous for making pyramids. So to start off, the pharaoh. So the pharaoh is at the top, rules everyone in society. So the pharaoh was believed to not only have quite a human role in society where he could make laws and enforce laws, but the pharaoh was also expected to perform godlike duties. So the people believed the pharaoh was in charge of the sun setting and rising, also the flooding of the Nile. So all these godlike abilities you're going to learn in the second lesson for social structure. Next level down, guys, you have the nobles, the priests, the senior officials, and the advisors to the pharaoh. And so they help the pharaoh run society. So the advisors would give the pharaoh advice. You'd have your senior officials who were in charge of things like the armies and the soldiers and taxes. And they would all help the pharaoh run society. Priests were also really important on this level because the ancient Egyptians were so closely linked to their religion. And so priests were held in really high regard in society and were quite close to the pharaoh as well. And then you had your nobles who were quite often related to the pharaoh in one shape or form as well. Next you have the scribes. Now the scribes wrote everything down in hieroglyphics, as you can see on this little note here. So they recorded history and events. So scribes were very well regarded in society because they could write, which is a skill not everyone had. The word hieroglyphic also comes from the word meaning sacred carving, which goes to demonstrate the fact that scribes were well respected in society. They used to sit in on things like when people would have business meetings, or they would record the meetings of the pharaoh and his advisors so they could go back over it. They were also in charge of inscribing hieroglyphs on the monuments and tombs of pharaohs as well. So they were very important people, and not everyone was taught how to write. Only certain few people were taught how to write, and that's why the scribes are so important. Next is your skilled artisans and craftspeople. So people who would make things, sculpt things, paint things, design things. So they were just under the scribes because they were important because they made things for the tombs of pharaohs and the tombs of your nobles as well. So they were quite well respected. Next is your peasant farmers and workers. Now we're getting into the stage where these were most of the people in Egypt. So your peasant farmers and workers, they made food for everyone. The pharaoh also provided them with land to farm on, but the pharaoh would also tax these people quite heavily. So they were quite poor, but quite important for society as well. But they weren't slaves. That's the other important thing to mention as well. They were just peasant farmers and common workers. Lastly, guys, are the servants and slaves. So you can see the little note here says, made all the monuments, they essentially made society great. And that's true because ancient Egypt really relied on its slave labor force. And Egypt would not have achieved so much without all the slaves that they had because they didn't have to pay for anything they did to slaves. They could, whip them, make them do anything and torture them. And they just did, they were slaves. They had to do what the people above them said. And so the slaves really made a lot of the monuments in ancient Egypt, and they were one of the reasons why ancient Egypt was so great and so powerful. So they certainly held up the pyramid as well. So after you've copied that down, guys, and listened to this description, you can go ahead and watch this video, which explains this pyramid a bit better with some visuals as well. It's really good. After that, guys, what I want you to do is using this worksheet here, and you can click out on the pop-out to access it. I want you to draw some of the levels of the social pyramid that we've just discussed. So you can see here, I've got some examples of students in the past and what they've done. So you can see I've got a pharaoh, a priest, a soldier, and another priest there. I've got a craftsman and a scribe. So what I want you to do is print this out if you're at home or if you're in class. Please draw on these. Draw one of the levels you see on the social pyramid here, and you can use Google to Google what these people look like or remember it from the video here as well. And some of them might even go on your classroom wall as well. So that brings us to the end of lesson 1, guys. So we've learned about the different levels of people and the types of people that lived in ancient Egypt and really ran ancient Egypt and helped their whole society and their whole empire run. So we've looked at the social pyramid. You've copied this down in your books and we've discussed it. You've watched this video that has some quite good visuals on that social pyramid, and you guys have developed your understanding by drawing some of the levels of the social pyramid that you've seen there, and you can see what those people look like as well. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you for lesson 2, the role of the pharaoh, why the pharaoh was so important and what they did and what the people believed they did as well. Remember, if you like any of my teaching resources and you want to stay up to date on any new videos I make or on any new websites I create, please make sure you go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.